Minister, I'm glad to hear you mention the relationship between Kilkenny businesses and the local Garda Síochána, and that indeed is making a huge impact in terms of tracking crime and alerting people to the possibility of crime throughout the city and county. Again, in terms of the text alerts, that too is working, so there is a community involvement there. The purpose of my question is to establish the number of Gardaí and the Garda stations, because there has been a significant drop, particularly in South Kilkenny, of 21, and then 9 in Carlow and 10 in the Kilkenny district.
Thank you, Deputy McGuinness. And indeed, I want to repeat what I said about I was briefed on the situation in Kilkenny and the kind of work that's being done with the community, the business organisation, the local Gardaí, and I think they have interrupted and prevented quite a number of crimes in the area, particularly the mobile gangs who were targeting Kilkenny at one point. Deputy, I've been informed by the Garda Commissioner in summary. There were 29 stations, as you're aware, on April 11, with 312 members assigned to the Carlow-Kilkenny division. On the 30th of April 16, there were 25 stations, a change in 4, in the Carlow-Kilkenny division, with 291 Gardaí assigned to the division. So there was 312 and 291. As the Deputy will understand, there's a lot of information down to station and sub-district level available, and you've requested that, and I have given you a breakdown of that detailed information. I won't go into it here replying, but that is available to you in terms of the area. I have already dealt with the background issue that we are now recruiting, and clearly there's greater numbers of Gardaí available. We are freeing up more Gardaí from what can be done by civilians, and in that context the Garda Commissioner obviously takes as I said, the particular crime trends and the needs of an area into account in determining what precisely the resources are. But I do think in terms of combating crime, the kind of work that we have seen, as I say, particularly in Kilkenny, it's a really good model to be copied elsewhere in terms of safety and security, both in an urban and a rural area.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy.
Say, Minister, again, the numbers can sometimes deceive, and the number of Garda stations can deceive. There is a huge problem in the rural parts of the county, and that has been raised earlier on by another deputy. And I have to say that the same pertains in Kilkenny, that the amount of burglaries and trespass on properties and other crime across North Kilkenny and South Kilkenny is significant. And we have to find, I think, a different model to deliver a better policing service where people can feel secure and safe. And in Kilkenny City, where €300,000 of cocaine and other drugs were confiscated just in the last week, the local Gardaí are to be complimented on the intelligence that they had, their work with the national headquarters and the determination to track down and prevent those drugs from getting onto the streets of the city and county of Kilkenny. And that's to be complimented. But that requires, as you said earlier on, and I acknowledge it, constant, regular reviewing, investment, updating of IT systems and so on. And I'd like to see that happen in Kilkenny.
Tánaiste.
Well, I take your points in relation to Kilkenny. I think it is worth looking at the TOR figures for the whole country, including the Kilkenny area. We have seen reductions. That is the reality, and that builds on the experience that we've had before. That where there's dedicated police operations, such as TOR, where you have the mobile patrols, where you have the intelligence, where you have the police working closely with all of the other stakeholders and the community involved, you can get reductions. We can beat this, and we have in many areas. Now, there is more work to be done. There's no question of that. This is ongoing. The fight against crime doesn't stop, and you're absolutely right that it is about using a variety of methods. It is about the utilisation of modern technology. It is about increased use of CCTV, particularly at strategic locations throughout the country, and we're examining that, and I expect to have a further announcement in relation to that later this year. But it is about making sure that all of the different elements come together, and obviously we need the greater number of Gardaí as well.
Deputy McGuinness.
On the investment front, I would encourage you, Minister, to look at the provision of a new Garda station in Kilkenny, looking at the network of Garda stations in the city, and one in the city, but in the county as well. Kilkenny City has, and like many of the other urban centres, has increased in its population and so on. And it's only recently that a temporary addition was added on to the extension was added on to that station. But there is a need to accommodate the modern technology, to accommodate all of what is necessary within Garda and enforcement and so on. And that's lacking in the context of the Garda station in Kilkenny City. And I would ask you to particularly look at that and the possibility of ring-fencing some funding for the extension of the CCTV that they have in urban centres. It's hugely successful. Again, it takes up space within a Garda station, so there's a need for the investment in the system itself, and there's a need for investment in terms of the accommodation. But the frontline Gardaí are doing what I consider to be, and I've seen them in operation, an excellent job. And I would like to see the continued review and investment, and I particularly draw your attention to the Garda station need in the city.
Tánaiste.
Well, one of the things I did last year, Deputy McGuinness, was I worked with Garda Síochána and the Office of Public Works so that we could identify the priority Garda stations around the country that needed investment and refurbishment. And we have a very clear plan in place in relation to that, and a timetable and a very detailed capital investment programme, because there are many Garda stations throughout the country where the standards are simply not good enough, that need to be refurbished and extended. We need the property and the property stores as well, where evidence can be stored properly until such time as it's needed for a particular court case. That capital programme was due for review next year. I'm hoping that can be done earlier next year rather than later next year. And certainly I'll bear in mind what you have to say about Kilkenny, because we will be reviewing the needs of different areas in relation to capital investment. And there is a very significant programme. People talk about closed Garda stations, but it's very important to recognise as well that there is a very significant programme of capital investment in Garda stations. There's the 3 new headquarters that are currently being built, and there is the new headquarters in Sligo as well.